Hello, friends and family, and anyone who could not attend Undergraduate Research Day 2026. So, just to preface this, my name is Lena Von Pacti. I'm currently a junior attending the University of Houston, and I am majoring in biology with a minor in health. And today, I'm presenting a piece of research me and my team have been working on for a while, and as you can see from the title, we looked into the relationship between exercise-induced fatigue and bilateral force asymmetry. So that's a lot of crazy words in one thing. So just to clarify something, um, bilateral force asymmetry, or just body asymmetry in general, is the imbalance in force, mobility, or coordination between our limbs. So, for example, you've probably seen tennis players before, and some of these dudes have massive right arms because they constantly hit forehands with their right arm compared to their left, which they don't utilize as much. Maybe for backhands, but these guys mostly use their dominant arm for serving and hitting. So you notice like there's an imbalance, obviously, in like force, for example, or you could say the same of soccer players where they have a dominant kicking leg and whatnot. So that's what that is and what we want to look into. So specifically in those kind of scenarios, research has been done and research has indicated that body asymmetry is related to higher rates of injury, or it increases injury risk specifically. And in that same light, it's also shown that in a lot of fatigue scenarios or exercise induced fatigue, people tend to get more asymmetrical. So, for example, if I had some like 5 pound weights on each of my arms, and I started doing a ton of bicep curls, I keep going, I keep going, I keep going. But towards the end, when I'm really tired, I'm really struggling, but intrinsically, my right arm still feels or is a little bit stronger than my left, so it moves up a little bit faster, and my left is still lagging behind because it's so much weaker. So that's kind of something that me being tired could possibly be related to me getting more asymmetrical towards the end when I'm trying to compensate using one side of my body more, etc., etc. So those are two things that we thought were really interesting, and which is why we want to look into the relationship between the two and how asymmetry can be affected by fatigue potentially. So it's really important to do this because we want to see if we can address any gaps in research that hasn't looked into it as much, which is what we did. So basically, we had 12 total test subjects, which is from last semester, and they were instructed to perform as many push-ups as possible on a split belt vertec treadmill. So push-ups is a great way to do this because it uses both sides of the body, and luckily we have the materials that helped us kind of distinguish between the two sides. So basically, the treadmill was actually split in half, left and right side. And what we had them do is have respectively put their left side on that one side of the treadmill and the right side on the other side. Because under those two halves of the treadmills, there's two separate force plates that would actually help us collect the amount of force a person would put out every single time they did a push-up. And alongside that, we had a Vicon camera system, which tracked a marker position, or a little marker we put at the back of their neck. And it was used to track movement, so it would help us detect things like trajectory, speed, and all that other stuff, which would help us calculate force for each of the push-ups. So, and we used MATLAB code to segment individual push-ups, and peak left and right forces were measured with that for each individual side and for each individual push-up as well. And we also used this equation down here, which is BFA percentage, which is bilateral force asymmetry percentage. That pretty much all it did was tell us how asymmetrical was someone for every single push-up. And we used the left and right forces for each individual push-up to determine that. And out of all the complete push-ups, because we had them do it to maximum failure, so, we just told them, hey, do push-ups until you're so tired, you're like, hey, I can't do it anymore, I'm going to stop. And out of those push-ups for each subject, we took and isolated the data to only the first and last 10% of push-ups, and those intervals were defined as pre-fatigue and post-fatigue, or just fatigued conditions. So pre-fatigue meaning like, oh, this is where I'm the most strong, which is obviously going to be at the start of the maximal repetition push-ups where they have the most energy. And then fatigued phase is where they're the most tired, which is the last 10%. It's like, at that point, I'm so tired, and like, I'm done. So if let's just say I did 50 push-ups. So my first 10% push-ups would be push-ups 1 through 5, and then my last 10% would be push-ups 45 to 50. and that's how we calculated and determined a few things for pre and post fatigue. So out of all the 12 subjects, we each got their individual BFA percentages for those first and last 10% of push-ups, and we averaged them all out together across all subjects. And essentially, like, this is, as you can see in this graph right here, this is the average pre-fatigue bilateral force asymmetry percentage across all 12 subjects, and of course we have the fatigue phase of the average BFA percentage across all 12 subjects. And oddly enough, BFA percentage, the average BFA percentage pre-fatigue was 6.59% compared to 5.6% in the fatigue phase. So in essence, it's pretty much saying majority of people were more asymmetrical or more imbalanced at the beginning than they were at the end, which is a really odd thing to find. And of course, we also performed a two-tailed pair t-test, which revealed no significant difference in BFA percentage between pre-fatigue and fatigue conditions. So it's pretty much saying that the change in percentage of asymmetry between the two phases as an average was not that significant at all. And of course, we also performed a standard deviation significance test, which resulted in a p-value of 0.4, which is really high for a p-value. So if the p-value was under 0.05, it would have indicated, like, yes, fatigue and bilateral asymmetry did have, like, a really close relationship to each other. But because we had a p-value that was so high at 0.4, it's kind of telling us, like, hey, fatigue and body asymmetry aren't, like, related at all, or, like, they're not significantly related to each other at all. And of course, as you can see here, as I'm kind of circling around this is like the same thing as this, but instead it's showing each individual subject. So as you can see, it's a really interesting pool of people. You have some people that start super asymmetrical, like, pretty much higher BFA percentages indicate they're more asymmetrical. The lower BFA percentage you are, the more symmetrical and balanced you are. But essentially, you have some people like here, like this gray line. This is one subject that started very asymmetrical and it got more symmetrical towards the end when they were fatigued. And then, of course, you have some people here that started, like, more balanced and got more imbalanced towards the end as they got more tired, which is kind of what I had the presumption of what would happen to everyone, but apparently not. And when I was looking at the data, it was a really fair 50-50 split. Like, a lot of people varied in the way they got either more symmetrical or asymmetrical towards the end, which is interesting. So, in essence, overall, this distinction is interesting because they're so closely related to each other and how they're always so closely, so, like, fatigue and asymmetry, because people have easily thrown them into the same box. And this study kind of indicates we should not be doing that. And instead, we should view asymmetry and fatigue as two different entities. Because I've seen in a lot of treatments or training for athletes or whatnot, they kind of just put them in the same category. Like, whenever you want to target something, they'll kind of put them in the same, it's like, this exercise or this training protocol is gonna, like, target and train, like, your asymmetry and your fatigue. But instead, it should be that they're separate things. So, demonstrating that exercise-induced fatigue does not influence BFA adds a critical nuance in current sports medicine literature, supporting the need to address BFA through mechanisms beyond fatigue alone. Because fatigue can't just be the only thing that could be related to body asymmetry, and it's really important to put those two apart. And the question should no longer be whether those two risk factors are linked by their effects, but rather how we should start viewing them as separate things. Because once we can view them separately and target them more specifically, treatments and training is going to get so much better, so much more targeted, and it's a lot better to do. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Bye!